I still remember the exact second my sister's confidence cracked. It wasn't during a negotiation. Not in front of investors. Not even in court. It happened in the lobby of her own real estate office, when an elderly man with a cane calmly looked at her and said, "Vanessa, I believe you told your sister I was dead." The color drained from her face so fast I thought she might faint. But I'm getting ahead of myself. My name is Leah Stoner. I'm 31 years old, and for the last 3 years, I've worked as the office manager at Stoner Real Estate in Scottsdale, Arizona. That title sounds impressive until you realize it's just a polite way of saying I do everything no one else wants to do. I answer phones. Schedule appointments. File endless paperwork. Clean the bathroom when the cleaner cancels. And make coffee, so much coffee that I'm convinced caffeine runs through my veins now. All of that for $38,000 a year, which in Scottsdale barely covers rent for my studio apartment. My place is so small I can vacuum the entire thing without unplugging. I used to joke that it built character. Truth is, it just reminded me how small my life had become. Meanwhile, my sister Vanessa, my boss, lived in a different universe. She's 7 years older than me. Drives a white Porsche Cayenne. Lives in a gated Paradise Valley home worth over $2 million. Wears designer clothes and smiles like someone who has never once worried about overdraft fees. Growing up, everyone said she was the capable one. The leader. The one who would figure life out. I believed that story too, especially after our parents died. I was 19 when a drunk driver ran a red light and killed them on their way home from dinner. One phone call erased everything I thought my life would be. Vanessa moved in with me immediately. Took control. Handled the funeral, the lawyers, the paperwork. I barely remember those weeks, just crying, breathing, surviving. She told me our parents had more debt than we knew. Mortgages. Credit cards. Hidden loans. After everything was settled, she said my share of the inheritance was $15,000. I didn't question it. Why would I? She was my sister. She also told me we had no family left. Our dad had cut ties with his father years ago. Grandpa had died before the accident. No grandparents. No one else. Just us. For 12 years, I lived that lie. I dropped out of college. Took whatever jobs I could find. Moved from tiny apartment to tinier apartment. Watched my sister rise while I barely stayed afloat. Then, 3 years ago, she offered me a job. Said she needed someone she could trust. I thought it was kindness. I didn't realize it was control. And I definitely didn't realize that one broken down Toyota, one bus ride, and one kind stranger would unravel everything she stole from me. Because that Tuesday morning, when my car died for the 3rd time that month, I stepped onto a crowded city bus. And unknowingly sat down next to the truth. That morning started like every other bad morning in my life. My car refused to start. Again. I sat behind the wheel of my 2009 Toyota, twisting the key, listening to the engine cough like it was personally offended that I expected it to work. The mechanic had already warned me, $900 or it would keep dying on me. I had $342 in my account. So I did what I hated doing. I walked to the bus stop. The January air was cold, sharp enough to sting my lungs, and my mind wouldn't stop racing. If I was late again, Vanessa would sigh loudly and remind me how unprofessional it looked. Maybe I could ask for an advance. She'd make me feel small first, but she usually agreed. The 7:15 bus was packed. I squeezed inside and found a seat halfway down the aisle, clutching my bag like it might float away. As the doors closed, an elderly man stepped on board. He wore a neatly pressed blazer, polished shoes, and carried himself with quiet dignity, but the stairs gave him trouble. He had a cane in one hand and a leather bag in the other. Then the cane slipped. Without thinking, I jumped up and grabbed his arm before he could fall. I picked up the cane and steadied him. He looked at me with bright blue eyes and laughed softly. "Well," he said, "that woke me up better than my morning coffee." I smiled and offered him my seat. He thanked me and introduced himself as Ted. "Just visiting the area," he said. "Thinking about making a change. Downsizing." We talked as the bus rattled forward. He asked what I did for work, and I gave him the short version: office manager at a real estate company. I complained lightly about my boss, careful not to say too much. When I mentioned the company name, Stoner Real Estate, his expression shifted for half a second. Just a flicker. I almost missed it. He didn't comment, just nodded and changed the subject. He had a warm way of talking, the kind that made you forget you were speaking to a stranger. He joked about bus drivers aiming for potholes like it was a sport. I laughed harder than I had in weeks. I remember thinking how unfair it was that I never had a grandfather like this. At least, that's what I believed. When we reached my stop, Ted surprised me by standing too. "Mind if I walk with you?" he asked. "I'd like to see the neighborhood. Maybe even look at a few listings." It was 2 blocks to the office. He seemed harmless, kind, even, so I said yes. We walked past palm trees and modern storefronts until the glass front building came into view. Silver letters gleamed above the entrance. Stoner Real Estate. Ted stopped walking. He stared at the sign like it had punched him in the chest. "You work here?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I said. "My sister owns it." His grip tightened on his cane. Inside, I offered him coffee and asked him to wait in reception. Vanessa was in her office on a call, her voice smooth and confident through the door. When she stepped out, she wore her perfect smile, until her eyes landed on Ted. The smile vanished. Her face went pale. Her hand reached for the doorframe like she needed support. Ted slowly stood up, straightened his jacket, and spoke words that shattered everything I thought I knew. "Hello, Vanessa," he said calmly. "I believe you told your sister I was dead." For a second, I honestly thought this was some kind of mistake. People don't just walk into your workplace and casually accuse your boss, your sister, of faking someone's death. That only happens in bad movies or courtroom dramas. So I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because my brain couldn't process anything else. "I'm sorry," I said, looking between them. "I think there's been a misunderstanding." Vanessa didn't laugh. She didn't move. She didn't even blink. Her face had gone completely still, like a porcelain mask that was starting to crack underneath. Ted turned toward me. His expression softened, but there was sadness in his eyes. Deep, worn sadness, like someone who had carried grief for far too long. "My name is Theodore Brennan," he said gently. "And I'm your grandfather." The room tilted. "No," I whispered. "That's not possible. Our grandfather died years ago. Before our parents' accident." Ted's eyes flicked back to Vanessa. "Is that what she told you?" My chest tightened. I looked at my sister, waiting for her to laugh, to roll her eyes, to say this man was confused. She didn't. Instead, she took a slow breath and forced a smile, the professional one she used when deals got uncomfortable. "Grandpa Ted," she said smoothly, "you're confused. This isn't the place for this. Let me explain." "I'm not confused," Ted replied. His voice wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was cold. "I hired a private investigator 3 months ago," he continued. "And I know exactly what you've done." He reached into his leather bag and pulled out a thick manila folder. My stomach dropped. The room felt too small. Too quiet. I could hear the hum of the air conditioner, the distant ring of phones from the back office. Vanessa's hands were shaking now. Ted turned to me again. "For 12 years, Leia, I believed you were dead. I was told you were in the back seat of the car. That you didn't survive." My ears rang. "What?" I whispered. I buried a granddaughter who was still alive, he said. And I almost didn't survive that grief. I stared at Vanessa. You told me he was dead. She finally lost her smile. That was complicated, she said quickly. You were young. Grieving. I was protecting you. Ted opened the folder. Inside were photographs. Printed emails. Legal documents. She told me you died, he said calmly. And she told you I died. 2 lies, perfectly designed to keep us apart. My legs felt weak. For 8 years, Ted continued, your sister visited me regularly. Brought gifts. Called on holidays. Played the role of my only surviving granddaughter. I felt sick. She told me she worked in consulting, he said. Never mentioned real estate. Never mentioned you. Never mentioned this office. Vanessa's voice snapped. You don't understand what I did for her. I turned on her. What you did for me? Ted looked at me. May I ask you something, Leia? I nodded numbly. What did you receive from your parents' estate? $15,000, I said. Vanessa said there were debts. Ted closed his eyes. When he opened them, his gaze was sharp. Your father had a life insurance policy worth $850,000, he said slowly. The house sold for over $400,000. Investments totaled more than $300,000. My breath caught. The estate was worth more than $1.6 million, he finished. Your share should have been over $800,000. The silence was unbearable. I looked at my sister, the woman I trusted with my entire life. You stole from me, I whispered. Vanessa opened her mouth. No words came out. I didn't remember leaving the office. I don't remember the drive home, the traffic, or unlocking my apartment door. My body moved on autopilot while my mind replayed the same numbers over and over again. $800,000. That money wasn't just cash. It was time. Safety. Choices. A future I never got to live. That night, I did something I should have done 12 years earlier. I opened the box. It sat in the back of my closet, shoved behind winter coats and old shoes. Vanessa had handed it to me after the funeral and told me it only contained sentimental things, photos, cards, nothing important. I believed her. Inside were old birthday cards, family pictures, handwritten notes from my mom. I sat on the floor, surrounded by memories, my hands shaking. At the very bottom, I found an envelope. It was yellowed with age. Addressed in my father's handwriting. To our daughters, Vanessa and Leia. My heart pounded. I remembered this letter. Vanessa had read parts of it to me years ago while I was crying so hard I couldn't see straight. She said it proved everything had been split fairly. I had never actually read it myself. I opened it. My father had written it before a business trip, the trip he never came back from. It was meant to be opened if something happened. The letter was calm. Organized. Loving. It listed everything. Life insurance, $850,000. Estimated house value, $420,000. Investments and savings, $340,000. At the bottom, in bold, unmistakable clarity. To be divided equally between our beloved daughters. I dropped the letter. 12 years of doubt crystallized into rage. I called Ted immediately. I found it, I said. The letter. She lied about everything. There was a pause on the line. Then he said, good. Because I found something too. The next morning, we met with his attorney, Patricia Holloway. She was in her mid-50s, silver hair pulled tight, eyes sharp enough to slice glass. She didn't waste time on sympathy. After reviewing the documents, she looked up and said, your sister didn't just steal from you. She committed multiple felonies. She explained it carefully. When I was 20, still drowning in grief, Vanessa had gone to court and claimed I was mentally incapacitated due to trauma. She said I couldn't make decisions on my own. She submitted documents, with my signature, giving her full control of the estate. I never signed them. Patricia slid copies across the table. The handwriting looked like mine. But it wasn't. She forged your signature, Patricia said flatly. And she lied to a judge. My stomach turned. Patricia kept going. The insurance money went into accounts Vanessa controlled. Debts were minimal, less than $80,000. Everything else? Gone. The house proceeds. The investments. Over $1.5 million. That's how she funded her business, Patricia said. Your inheritance built Stoner Real Estate. I thought about every cup of coffee I'd made her. Every time she reminded me how lucky I was to work for her. Ted's case was just as bad. For 8 years, Vanessa had taken over $200,000 from him. Changed his will. Was days away from gaining power of attorney. That's elder financial exploitation, Patricia said. And prosecutors take that very seriously. She leaned back. You have 2 options, she said. A civil lawsuit, or criminal charges. Ted and I didn't hesitate. We wanted justice. Patricia raised a finger. Then we do this quietly. 3 weeks. You act normal. You don't tip her off. 3 weeks. I had to smile at the woman who stole my life. 3 weeks doesn't sound like a long time. But when you're smiling at someone who stole 12 years of your life, 3 weeks feels like torture. Every morning, I walked into Stoner Real Estate and played my role. I answered phones. Scheduled showings. Made coffee, extra hot, exactly the way Vanessa liked it. I smiled when she praised me in front of clients. I nodded when she reminded me how lucky I was to work there. Inside, I was screaming. Every good morning, Vanessa felt like swallowing broken glass. At night, everything changed. That's when Ted, Patricia, and I became a team. We met in Patricia's office or at Ted's place in Sedona. The dining table disappeared under piles of documents, bank statements, court filings, property records. Patricia moved through it all like a surgeon. She traced the money. Every dollar told a story. The life insurance payout? Deposited into an account Vanessa opened 3 days after our parents' funeral. The house sale? Routed through a holding account, then quietly transferred. The investments? Liquidated within months. Patricia showed me charts and timelines. This wasn't panic, she said. This was planning. That hurt more than anything. Vanessa didn't steal because she was desperate. She stole because she believed she deserved it. The deeper Patricia dug, the uglier it got. Vanessa had a silent business partner named Russell Kerr, a wealthy investor who'd provided early capital when the company launched. He trusted her completely. Never checked the books. Never questioned the numbers. He's about to have a very bad day, Patricia muttered. Ted's situation was just as calculated. Vanessa had kept her 2 lives perfectly separate. She never mentioned real estate around him. Never used the company name. Told him she worked in vague financial consulting. That's why he never Googled her. That's why he never saw my photo until 3 months ago. The day everything started unraveling. At work, Vanessa started acting different. She watched me more closely. Asked casual questions. You seem tired lately, she said one afternoon. Everything okay? Just car trouble, I replied, forcing a laugh. She nodded, but her eyes lingered. Paranoia was setting in. Patricia warned me. People like your sister sense danger before it arrives. Be careful. Then, 2 weeks in, something unexpected happened. Russell Kerr walked into the office. He was tall, well-dressed, and visibly tense. I need to talk to Vanessa, he said. I watched from my desk as he went into her office. The door shut. Voices rose. Not shouting, but sharp. An hour later, Russell stormed out without looking at me. That night, Patricia called. Good news, she said. Russell's cooperating. Apparently, he'd noticed discrepancies. Missing funds. Fake expense reports. Payments to shell companies. Once he realized law enforcement was inevitable, he chose survival. He handed over everything. Emails. Bank records. Contracts. It's no longer just a family crime, Patricia said. It's a federal one. By the end of the third week, the case was airtight. Patricia called me the night before she filed. Tomorrow, she said, your sister's life implodes. I lay awake in my tiny apartment, staring at the ceiling. Tomorrow, the woman who controlled my entire life would lose everything. And I would finally be free. The clock on my computer read 2:47 p.m. I kept staring at it, pretending to work while my heart pounded so loudly I was sure everyone could hear it. Every sound in the office felt amplified, the printer humming, phones ringing, footsteps in the hallway. Then the front door opened. 2 men walked in wearing dark suits. They didn't look like clients. They didn't browse the listing wall or glance at the decor. They scanned the room with practiced eyes, calm and focused. Can I help you? I asked, my voice steady despite the adrenaline burning through me. We're looking for Vanessa Stoner, one of them said, flipping open a badge. Time slowed. She's in her office, I said, pointing toward the back. They nodded and walked past me. Vanessa stepped out seconds later, already wearing her perfect professional smile. Cream-colored designer dress. Hair flawless. Heels clicking confidently on the tile. Good afternoon, officers, she said warmly. How can I help you? Vanessa Stoner, the taller one said, you are under arrest. The smile vanished instantly. For forgery, fraud, theft by deception, and elder financial exploitation, he continued. You have the right to remain silent. I watched as handcuffs closed around the wrists that once wore diamond bracelets. Vanessa turned toward me, eyes wild. You did this, she hissed. After everything I did for you? I didn't speak. I gave you a job, she screamed. I took care of you when Mom and Dad died. You'd be nothing without me. The officers guided her toward the door as she fought them every step. Nothing, she shouted back at me. The door slammed. Silence. I sat down at my desk and took a deep breath. For the first time in 12 years, my chest didn't feel tight. But the arrest was only the beginning. By the next morning, the story was everywhere. Local real estate star arrested for fraud. Phones rang non-stop, but not with new clients. Existing ones panicked. Deals froze. Listings were pulled. Russell Kerr's forensic accountant uncovered even more. Fake expenses. Missing escrow funds. Shell companies. The FBI stepped in. Vanessa's assets were frozen. Her house seized. Her Porsche towed from the driveway. Her real estate license suspended. I drove past her house once. There was a federal seizure notice taped to the door. It felt surreal. The trial came fast. Ted testified first, about the years of lies, the manipulated will, the betrayal. His voice never shook. Then I testified. I told them about being 19. About trusting my sister. About living small while she lived large on stolen money. Vanessa tried to charm the jury. It didn't work. The verdict came after 3 weeks. Guilty. On all counts. The judge didn't hold back. You represent the worst kind of predator, he said. One who hides behind family while destroying lives. She was sentenced to 27 years in federal prison. She'll be 65 before parole. Restitution was ordered. Everything she owned was liquidated. I received my inheritance, with interest. Ted got his money back. The other victims did too. Justice wasn't loud. It was final. When everything was finally over, the silence felt strange. No more court dates. No more meetings with lawyers. No more waking up with my stomach in knots. Just quiet. The restitution check arrived in a plain envelope. No ceremony. No apology attached. Just numbers on paper representing 12 stolen years. After taxes and legal fees, it came to just under $1 million. Not a fantasy fortune. But enough. The first thing I did wasn't glamorous. I paid off every debt I'd ever had. Credit cards. Medical bills. Old student loans I never finished paying because I never finished college. Watching those balances hit zero felt better than any shopping spree ever could. Then I quit my job. No dramatic speech. No celebration. I left my office key on the desk and walked out without looking back. A week later, I enrolled in night classes. Business. Finance. Ethics. I wanted to understand money, not fear it. Using part of my inheritance, I started a small property management company. Nothing flashy. No luxury branding. Just transparency and honesty. I named it Brennan Properties. Ted laughed when I told him. I think your father would approve, he said. Ted and I grew close fast, but not rushed. Sunday dinners. Long phone calls. Shared stories about the years we lost and the ones we still had. One evening, sitting on his porch in Sedona, he said something that made me cry harder than the trial ever did. Your dad would be proud of you, he said quietly. 6 months later, I received a letter. The return address was a federal correctional facility. Vanessa. She said she was sorry. She said she made mistakes. She said I was the only family she had left. She asked for money. I read it once. Then I threw it away. Some doors stay closed. A year later, my assistant buzzed my office phone. There's a call from a correctional facility, she said. Do you want to accept? I didn't hesitate. No. I hung up and went back to work. Building something real. Something honest. Something mine. Because I learned something important. Lies don't disappear. They wait. And the truth always finds its way out, sometimes on a crowded bus, carried by a stranger with a cane who just needed a seat. Be kind anyway. You never know who's been waiting 12 years to find you. I thought the story ended with peace. That once the court dates were done and the money was returned, life would simply settle. Like dust after a storm. I was wrong. Justice doesn't erase the past. It just gives you room to finally feel it. A few months after I started Brennan Properties, the nightmares began. Not about Vanessa in prison. Not about courtrooms or handcuffs. They were about being 19 again, standing in the hallway of my childhood home, hearing my parents' voices, and realizing I'd trusted the wrong person at the worst possible moment of my life. Grief I never processed came back, heavier than before. Ted noticed it before I said anything. You don't heal all at once, he told me during one of our Sunday dinners. Sometimes the body waits until it's safe. Safe. That word stuck with me. Because for the first time in my adult life, I actually was. No debt. No fear of eviction. No sister controlling my reality. And that safety gave my mind permission to open old wounds. Then something unexpected happened. One afternoon, I received an email from a woman named Rachel Moore. Her subject line read, I think your sister stole from me too. My stomach dropped. Rachel was in her early 60s. A retired school counselor. She'd worked with Vanessa years ago, selling her home to downsize after her husband passed away. The numbers never added up, she wrote. I thought I was just confused. She wasn't. She'd lost over $60,000. I forwarded the email to Patricia immediately. Within weeks, more messages came in. Different states. Different years. Same pattern. Vanessa hadn't just stolen occasionally. She'd built a system. Patricia explained it carefully. Some of these victims were embarrassed, she said. Some didn't even realize they were victims. And some were afraid no one would believe them. That hit me hard. Because that had been me. The authorities reopened portions of the case. Additional charges were added. Vanessa's appeal, already weak, collapsed completely. Her sentence didn't change much in years, but it changed in meaning. She wasn't just a criminal. She was a pattern. Around that same time, Ted asked me something unexpected. Have you ever thought about telling your story publicly? I hesitated. I didn't want attention. I didn't want sympathy. But I did want one thing. Truth. We worked with a victims advocacy group. I spoke anonymously at first. Just my voice. Just the facts. And something incredible happened. People listened. Other victims came forward. Other families recognized the warning signs. Other younger siblings questioned stories they'd been told for years. I realized then, this story wasn't just mine. It was a reminder. That authority doesn't equal honesty. That grief makes people vulnerable. That silence protects the wrong people. And that truth doesn't need to be loud. It just needs time. One evening, as I locked up my office, my phone buzzed. A notification from the correctional facility. Incoming message request. From Vanessa. I stared at the screen. For the first time, I didn't feel anger. I felt clarity. I deleted the notification without opening it. Some lessons don't need repeating. There was one question I avoided for a long time. Not because I didn't know it existed, but because I was afraid of the answer. How did I not see it? How did I spend 12 years believing a lie so big it stole my future? That question haunted me most at night. When the office was quiet. When Ted had gone home. When there was nothing left to distract me. At first, I blamed myself. I replayed every conversation with Vanessa after our parents died. Every moment she told me not to worry. Every time she said she was handling it. I told myself I was weak. Naive. Too trusting. But then Patricia said something during one of our last meetings that changed everything. Fraud like this doesn't succeed because the victim is stupid, she said. It succeeds because the criminal understands grief. That sentence cracked something open inside me. I wasn't careless. I was 19. I was traumatized. I had just lost the two people who made the world feel safe. And the person who stepped in to help me was my sister. Manipulation doesn't start with lies. It starts with comfort. Vanessa didn't steal from me all at once. She isolated me. Told me we had no family left. Told me money was gone. Told me I was lucky to have anything at all. Then she controlled the narrative. She handled the paperwork. Spoke to the lawyers. Filtered the information. I never thought to question her because questioning her felt like betraying the only person I had left. That's how it works. People like Vanessa don't overpower you. They position themselves as indispensable. Once I understood that, the shame started to fade. I began noticing patterns I'd missed before. How she discouraged me from finishing college. How she downplayed every opportunity one mentioned. How she praised me just enough to keep me dependent. You don't need more stress, she'd say. I've got this. And I believed her. Because belief was easier than being alone. Ted helped me see it too. She didn't just steal your money, he said one evening. She stole your confidence. That hurt, but it was true. She trained me to think small. So when she offered me a low-paying job, I felt grateful instead of insulted. When she controlled my finances, I felt relieved instead of suspicious. She didn't need force. She had access. Understanding that didn't excuse what she did, but it freed me from blaming myself. And once the self-blame disappeared, something else happened. I stopped shrinking. I started speaking more confidently in meetings. I trusted my instincts. I said no, without apologizing. I even stopped explaining myself. One afternoon, a young woman reached out through the advocacy group. "My older brother handles all my finances," she wrote. "After hearing your story, I asked questions for the first time. That message meant more to me than any restitution check. Because it meant the damage didn't end with me. And neither did the healing." That night, as I locked up my office, I realized something important. Vanessa didn't ruin my life. She delayed it. And now, finally, I was living it on my own terms. But I didn't know yet that one final truth was still waiting to surface. One that would completely change how I remembered my parents. I thought I finally knew everything. The lies. The money. The manipulation. I believed there were no more surprises left. Then Ted handed me a small, worn notebook. We were cleaning out a storage box in his garage, old family things he'd kept after my father cut contact years ago. Most of it was ordinary. Receipts. Manuals. Birthday cards. The notebook didn't look important. Plain cover. No label. But inside was my father's handwriting. Ted watched me carefully as I flipped through the pages. "Your dad used to write when he was worried," he said. "About you girls. About the future." The entries weren't long. Just thoughts. Lists. Plans. Then I reached the pages dated just months before the accident. My heart started pounding. My father had written about Vanessa. Not cruelly. Not angrily. Concerned. He wrote that she was brilliant, driven, but impatient. That she wanted control too early. That she struggled when things didn't go her way. One line stood out. "I worry Vanessa sees responsibility as ownership." I swallowed hard. Another entry talked about the estate. He and my mother had discussed setting up separate trustees if anything happened, specifically to protect me while I was still young. They were planning to involve Ted. They just hadn't finalized it yet. If the accident hadn't happened when it did, Vanessa would never have had full access. My hands trembled as I closed the notebook. "She knew," I whispered. Ted nodded slowly. "She always knew your parents were watching closely. And when they were gone, there was no one left to stop her." The betrayal deepened. This wasn't just opportunity. It was defiance. Vanessa didn't steal because she could. She stole because she believed she was smarter than everyone else, including our parents. I drove home that night feeling strangely calm. Not angry. Resolved. For years, I'd wondered if my parents would be disappointed in me. If they'd think I failed. Now I knew the truth. They tried to protect me. They trusted the wrong person, not me. A week later, I received another letter from the correctional facility. I didn't open it. Instead, I wrote one of my own. Not to Vanessa. To my parents. I didn't send it anywhere. I didn't need to. I wrote about who I'd become. About the business. About Ted. About learning to trust myself again. When I finished, I folded the letter and placed it inside the notebook. Some conversations don't need answers. That night, I stood on my balcony and looked out at the city lights. 12 years ago, I thought my life ended. It didn't. It just waited. And I was finally ready for the last chapter. Closure doesn't arrive with fireworks. It comes quietly. In small decisions that finally belong to you. The morning I truly felt free, nothing dramatic happened. I woke up early, made coffee the way I liked it, and drove to work without knots in my stomach. My office was small. 2 desks. 1 window. No luxury branding. No fake confidence. Just honesty. I sat at my desk and reviewed leases, answered emails, solved problems, real ones, not manufactured chaos meant to keep someone in control. And for the first time, I didn't feel like I was playing catch-up. I felt present. Ted called later that afternoon. "I've made some decisions," he said. He'd finalized his will again. This time with an independent attorney. No secrets. No pressure. "I'm not trying to replace the years we lost," he told me. "I just want the years we have left to be real." That was enough. We didn't talk about Vanessa much anymore. Not because we were avoiding it, but because she no longer had a place in our future. I did one last thing before closing that chapter completely. I visited our parents' graves. I hadn't gone in years. I brought no flowers. No speeches. Just myself. I told them the truth. That I'd been lost for a long time. That I'd trusted the wrong person. That I'd learned, slowly, how to stand on my own. I didn't ask for forgiveness. I didn't need it. I stood there until the sun dipped low, then walked away without looking back. A few weeks later, my assistant forwarded an email. A young woman had found my story through the advocacy group. "Your story saved me," she wrote. I asked questions before it was too late. I read that message twice. That's when I understood something important. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means breaking the pattern. Vanessa's story ended in a cell. Mine didn't. It continued, with choice, with clarity, with quiet strength. I changed my phone number. Blocked the correctional facility. Stopped waiting for apologies that would never be real. I focused on what I could build. And slowly, steadily, life stopped feeling like something that happened to me. It became something I shaped. That night, as I locked up my office, I caught my reflection in the glass. I didn't see the scared 19-year-old anymore. I saw someone grounded. Someone aware. Someone unafraid of the truth, even when it hurts. And as I turned out the lights, I smiled. Because some people spend their lives running from the truth. Others survive it. And a few, finally, learn to live beyond it. People ask me all the time what the turning point was. They expect me to say the arrest. Or the verdict. Or the day the money came back. But none of those moments changed my life. The real turning point happened on a crowded city bus, when I stood up for a stranger without expecting anything in return. That's what still amazes me. If I'd stayed seated that morning. If I'd ignored the man struggling with his cane. If I'd been too tired, too distracted, too bitter. None of this would have happened. The lies might have lasted forever. That thought used to haunt me. Now, it humbles me. Because it reminded me of something simple and powerful. Truth doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrives quietly, disguised as coincidence. In the months after everything settled, I stopped chasing explanations. I didn't need to know why Vanessa became who she did. I didn't need closure from her. I already had something better. Clarity. I understood now that betrayal doesn't come from strangers, it comes from people who know exactly where you're vulnerable. And healing doesn't come from revenge, it comes from reclaiming your agency. I kept my life intentionally small. Not limited, intentional. I still live in Scottsdale, but in a home I chose because it feels peaceful, not impressive. I still drive my Subaru, and it still starts every single time. That alone feels like a miracle. Brennan Properties grew slowly. Carefully. The way healthy things do. Clients trust me because I tell them the truth, even when it costs me a deal. Especially then. Ted and I still have Sunday dinners. Sometimes we talk about the past. Sometimes we don't. We don't try to replace what was lost. We honor it by not wasting what's left. Every once in a while, I think about the version of myself who believed she was unlucky. Behind. Less than. I wish I could tell her this. You weren't failing. You were being delayed by someone else's greed. And delays end. The truth always finds daylight. Sometimes it takes 12 years. Sometimes it takes one small act of kindness. So if there's one thing I hope you take from my story, it's this. Be kind, even when it feels pointless. Ask questions, even when it feels uncomfortable. And never mistake silence for safety. Because the truth has a way of showing up when you least expect it. Often on a bus. Often disguised as a stranger. Often waiting for you to stand up. Thank you for staying with me through this story. If you're still here, that tells me you understand something important too. And if another story just appeared on your screen, one that promises truth, justice, and unexpected twists, click it. You never know what you're about to uncover.